Well, we talked with Hitch, and when I told him that I wanted to do this kind of suspense series, he said, "What are you going to call it?" And I said, "Well, I haven't worked out anything in my mind. All I know is that this is going to be stories of suspense." And he said, "Well, why don't you just call it Suspense?" I thought that was a very brilliant idea, and that's how Suspense title came into the series. Hitch agreed to do this, and in effect all he was going to do was lend his name, and because he was interested in broadcasting, he wanted to really sit in and watch how this thing was put together.
Welcome to Breaking Walls, episode 154. My name is James Scully. Tonight on Breaking Walls, we highlight the birth of suspense from pilot program to star-studded affair. Along the way, we'll play 1944 episodes with Hollywood's biggest names. If this is your first time listening to Breaking Walls, welcome to the show. Tonight's opening theme is a certain show's song, slowed down by 600%. I'd tell you which, but then, like many suspense characters, you might not get out alive. Support Breaking Walls at patreon.com/thewallbreakers and subscribe everywhere you get a podcast, especially YouTube at youtube.com/@thewallbreakersllc. Join the Breaking Walls Facebook group to keep in touch with news, snippets, photos, and other additions to the podcast at facebook.com/group/thewallbreakers. And the first 8 chapters of Burning Gotham are out everywhere you can get a podcast and at burninggotham.com. It was a 2022 Tribeca Film Festival audio selection.
Bill Lewis, who was the program chief of CBS in New York and my boss, and William Paley, who was probably the finest, creative, courageous program man in the history of our industry, to start a series called Forecast. And each summer, we did anything we wanted to do that we felt was new and different in the business. I would do 4 in Hollywood, and Mr. Lewis's staff would do 4 in New York.
Now, to all our listeners, wherever you may be, our sponsors, the makers of Lux Flakes and Lux Toilet Soap, join me in wishing you a happy summer. And until September 9th, this is Cecil B. DeMille saying good night and goodbye to you from Hollywood.
In July of 1940, CBS's Lux Radio Theatre was scheduled for its summer hiatus. Lux aired 60-minute condensations of films Mondays at 9 p.m. Pulling a rating of 23.7, it was CBS's highest-rated show and Monday's most listened-to program. Head of CBS William Paley and program director Bill Lewis wanted to use the vacated time slot to attract both audience participation and potential sponsors. At that time, CBS's story editor was William Spear.
I became head of the script department in 1940. In that year, CBS had always had an 8-week hiatus for the Lux Radio Theatre, a posh show, Cecil B. DeMille as host, and they did a cut-down, slightly adapted version of some famous movie with the stars of that movie or with similar stars. The 8 weeks in the summer had to be filled by something every year at CBS. And in 1940, Bill Lewis, William B. Lewis, a wonderful, wonderful man, as was William Paley, as was Davidson Taylor, as was Douglas Coulter, and so many great, great people that I miss terribly much. Decided that it would be good to, why not use the 8 weeks as a, what we would now call pilot in TV, but as an audition or as a showcase for a new show that could be sold. And to this end, 8 shows were invented.
They decided to launch a pilot series to workshop new shows. They called it Forecast. It debuted on July 15, 1940. Each week, 2 30-minute shows, one from New York and one from Hollywood, aired live. CBS petitioned their audience to write in about the pilots they liked. On July 22nd at 9:30 p.m., a Forecast took to the air starring Herbert Marshall, Edmund Gwenn, and Noreen Gammill. This particular one was conceived by Charles Vanda.
I had always wanted to do a psychological thriller with big, rich music and big, rich stars with a big, rich budget. And I knew I had a chance to do that. Now, I was reasonably sure that the audience would accept the melodramatic thrillers, well done and with important stars. After Mr. Lewis told me to search it out and see what I could come up with, I talked with a friend of mine named Nat Wolf, who later on did very good programming. He wound up as executive vice president in charge of broadcasting for Young and Rubicam. At that time, he was a talent agent, and in his office was a roster of clients that were the greatest in Hollywood. They included the Herbert Marshalls and the Spencer Tracys and the Clark Gables and the Carol Lombards and so on. I told him what I wanted to do, and I wanted him to get me the star for this one-time shot of Forecast in which we would do a suspense program. Well, Herbert Marshall was a very big star at that time, was his client, and was also a very good friend of mine. The three of us talked about doing a suspense show, and then to put the so-called stardust into it, I said, gee, we ought to have an important Hollywood producer, if we can get one, to front it. And we really meant front it. We'd give him all the publicity. He didn't have to attend rehearsals. He could participate in it as much as he wanted to. We hoped he would put some of his own touches into it. And we, of course, all wanted Hitchcock.
Born in New York on June 6, 1903, Vanda got into radio and moved to Los Angeles in 1935 to be the CBS West Coast program director. Although Los Angeles was still a minor outpost for radio, by decade's end, it overtook Chicago and matched New York as a major broadcasting hub. William Paley was keen on pushing programming in Hollywood, and Vanda's boss, Bill Lewis, was a man who proudly championed shows like the Columbia Workshop. Among the people Lewis helped was Norman Corwin.
How much of that can be ascribed to Paley?
I think that, after all, Paley was the boss. He could have called that off. He could have said, wait a minute, we're being too liberal. But he didn't. The man from whom I benefited most was a man named William B. Lewis, vice president in charge of programs when I joined CBS. He exerted that influence on the network. Paley accommodated that. In those days, the network was more or less a family affair. It was not the giant that it is today, the diversified giant. So one did see a good deal of Paley. He came around one evening with his wife and sat in the control room while I did a program. And when I was in England doing the American in England series, one time he was visiting London and said, how would you like to come out with me to an airdrome? The British are going to take off on a raid over Germany, and we've been invited to see the flyers take off, and we'll stay around until they return. And I went with him. Well, you know, that's a wonderful kind of a boss to work for.
Sure it is. I think it was Ed Murrow who said just before he died, you know, when I started at CBS, there was one boss, and now there are 50 vice presidents.
Right.
That was in the 60s. I don't know what there would be today.
Yeah.
It seemed like CBS, you know, had somebody in the right position at that time in almost every area. I mean, they had Mr. Lewis here, and then they had Paul White working in news. It was a pretty predominant network at that time, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. That was the time of Ed Murrow and Bob Trout and Charlie Collingwood.
Vanda conceived the mystery program as a drama with famous stars, a large orchestra, and a well-known host. The man Vanda wanted was Alfred Hitchcock. It was Hitchcock who came up with the show name, Suspense.
This is Hollywood and CBS presenting Forecast Number 4. Herbert Marshall, directed by Alfred Hitchcock in the first program of a proposed new series entitled Suspense. Tonight's Forecast program, ladies and gentlemen, represents the ideal form of collaboration. Mr. Alfred Hitchcock, brilliant English director of such outstanding motion pictures as The 39 Steps, Rebecca, and Foreign Correspondent, was eager to create a very special type of radio drama, the suspense story. As narrator and star for his production, he thought at once of the distinguished actor with whom he had been associated in countless British film successes, Herbert Marshall. Mr. Marshall suggested that they dramatize a certain favorite story of his, and that story happened to be the very one Mr. Hitchcock had had in mind. Mrs. Belloc Lowndes' classic in Chills, The Lodger. The Lodger is a work of fiction which springs from recorded fact. A story which begins in the year 1888 in London. A London terrorized by the fifth in a succession of recent murders. It was believed that these deeds were the work of one person, a tall, gaunt figure in a black Inverness cape, carrying a small, narrow bag. That meager description, provided by a highly unnerved witness, was the sum total of all that was known of the murderer. It was enough, however, to keep alive and alert the interest of all London, of all those in fine quarters, and all those in small, grimy houses, as, for example, Ellen Bunting. Ellen was no different from all the other middle-aged housewives dwelling in the great city's squalid Whitechapel district. She knew all the known facts of the case. As Herbert Marshall will tell you, Ellen knew it was quite proper to refer to this wielder of the knife as the Avenger.
Lud Gluskin, who was a musical director at CBS, did the original music for this one-time presentation of Forecast for CBS. Anyway, following those meetings with Hitchcock and Bart Marshall, I called in a man who I think is one of the top writers in the industry, a remarkable guy named Harold Medford. And we discussed the kind of shows, the types of stories or books that we should try to acquire to finally decide which one will be our pilot on Forecast. And we picked Belloc Lowndes' The Lodger. And we started to prepare the script. Then we realized in reading the book that there is no denouement at the end of the book. Just the lodger just takes his bags and leaves, and that's the end of him. And we were a little puzzled with this and didn't know whether we should put an actual ending such as catching the lodger or the lodger running to his own doom. Hitch said, well, let's leave it that way, because this is the story, and if I'm going to be in it, I should follow the storyline of one of the great mystery books of the day.
What are we going to do? Tell me that.
We'll get along, dear. Something will turn up.
Oh, we haven't had a lodger for months. Nobody even comes to look at the room anymore.
Yes, but things will work out a little.
Oh, they ain't never going to work out. Soon we won't even have a roof over our heads and...
Oh?
Oh, I'm sorry, Robbie. I didn't mean to take on so...
Oh, I know, dear, I know. It's all right.
Oh, I didn't think it. It's just that I've been so worried.
Well, don't you go worrying another second, old girl. Why, first thing you know, you won't be pretty anymore. You'll have your face all wrinkled.
Now,
and now, come on, now, let's see a smile. Come on, just have one
Oh,
smile for
leave
me.
me
Just
alone,
one
I
smile
won't.
like you used to, eh? Who do you suppose that could be?
The late visitors are... Bunting. Do you think it could be somebody looking for rooms?
Well, it might be. You want me to go to the door?
No, I'll go.
Oh.
You just stay here.
Yes, all right. Now, be sure you get a good look at the rooms before you let them in, dear.
Oh, I'm coming. Oh, I do hope it's... Yes, sir?
Is it not true that you let lodgings?
Yes, sir. Won't you come in, sir?
Thank you.
Could I take your cape, sir?
There's no need. Now, I'm looking for a quiet room. It must be quiet.
Oh, we have that, sir. Above all, our house is quiet. Your bag, sir. May I take it?
No, I'll hold it. You'll be so good as to show me the room, please.
Oh, yes, sir. It's right up these stairs, sir. This way.
Thank you.
You see, sir, there's just my husband and me here, and we're ever so quiet, and I'm sure you'll find this room to your liking, sir. Here we are. Now, I'll just light the gas. There.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
It is pleasant, isn't it, sir? And there's not many rooms with such pretty pictures, are there now? We've had them in the family for years, sir, and...
Pictures interest me very little. You see, what really impresses me about the room is the very simplicity of it, the bareness.
Yes, sir. It's not at all crowded, is it?
It will be quite suitable, Mrs.
Bunting.
Mrs. Bunting. You see, I do a great deal of studying in my book here, the Holy Bible.
Yes, sir. Please, sir, let me help with your luggage.
No, don't touch it.
Oh, but I only wish to...
Oh, you only wish to help, of course. You must forgive me, Mrs. Bunting. It's just that I'm so very weary.
Of course, sir.
He bringeth them to their desired haven. Beautiful words, Mrs. Bunting.
Indeed they are, sir.
And now at last I have found my haven of rest.
Yes, sir. Then you'll be taking the room.
Let us see now. What are you going to charge me? With attendance, mind. I shall be staying in most of the time, and I shall be wanting meals.
Oh, we can see to that.
Then does 30 shillings a week suit you?
30... Why, yes, sir. Yes, sir, that will be quite all right.
Good, and I shall pay you in advance. My name is Sleuth, Mrs. Bunting.
Mr. Sleuth.
Sleuth. Think of a hound, Mrs. Bunting, and you'll never forget my name. 23, 4, 30 shillings.
Thank you, sir.
And I think I should enjoy a little light supper now, Mrs. Bunting. Bread and butter, perhaps. Could you arrange that?
Well, certainly, sir. I'll do that now. And if you'd be requiring any beer or spirits...
Certainly not.
Oh,
On July 22nd, the day Suspense was to air, Hitchcock was unexpectedly called to New York and wouldn't be able to appear. Rather than change directions, British actor Edmund Stevens imitated Hitchcock.
Well, we thought it'd be kind of interesting then, and I suggested that when we get to that point, that Hitchcock just says, stop. And he comes on microphone, and he does a little teaser to the audience that, well, he doesn't know who the lodger was. The police didn't know who the lodger was. So you, the listener, will not be told who the lodger was.
As Ellen neared her neighborhood, her dread increased. With each moving footstep, the grip of terror grew tighter about her. She moved faster. If only she were in time. She was 2 streets away from the house. Then one. Then she saw Bunting. Sharply, like the thrust of a knife, she realized what this meant. Daisy was left alone with the lodger.
Bunting!
Helen, what is it?
Oh, Bunting, tell me, Bunting. Where's Daisy? Where is she? I say, where?
Why, home.
Oh, listen to me. Try to understand. Sleuth is the avenger.
What are you saying?
Oh, lodger. He's the avenger, Bunting. Oh, but there's no time for that. Daisy's in danger. Hurry.
Yes. Daisy.
She's not here. What about the dining room?
No, she's not there. She's not downstairs.
Then there's just his room. Go on. Open the door.
Cut. What's the idea, Hitch? I have a few more lines to do.
As Mr. Marshall, the narrator, you have. Not as Mr. Sleuth, the lodger.
Hitch, you can't stop the play right here. It isn't fair, you know.
Why isn't it, Bart? What more is there to say?
But Mr. Hitchcock, won't people want to know what Bunting and me found in the room?
All right, Ellen. What precisely did you find?
Well, nothing, sir.
There. You see? Nothing. No Roger, no Bible. And that locked dresser drawer. What about that?
We unlocked it, sir.
And what was in it?
Nothing, sir.
You are certain, Mrs. Bunting?
Oh, you gave me quite a turn, Mr. Mr. Marshall. Yes, sir, I'm sure, sir. There was nothing.
Well, begging your pardon, Mr. Hitchcock, but don't you think we'd better just mention about Daisy?
I don't know, Bunting. What do you think we ought to say?
Oh, just that the reason she wasn't in the house when Ellen and me got there was, well, she'd gone out for a walk, that's all.
Did she enjoy it?
Oh, very much, sir. Made it to King's Cross and back in just under an hour, sir.
Splendid time, Bunting. Well, there you are, Bart. There's the story.
Now, wait a minute, Mr. Hitchcock. You can't do that. That's not the story.
Of course it's not. Now, look here, Hitch. Here's the fellow who composed and conducted all our music, Wilbur Hatch. He wants to know about this, too. Everybody does.
All right, Bart. What is it they want to know?
What became of Mr. Sleuth?
Oh, him. Why, he left that afternoon. They never saw him again. And now I think we ought to say something about the Columbia forecast.
Mr. Hitchcock,
so far.
sir, will you please...
Stop him, Mr. Marshall.
Hitch, listen to me.
Yes? What is it?
They want to know when the Avenger finally was caught.
Oh, well, let me ask you something, Bart. Are you acquainted with Loretta Young?
Yes, what's that got to do with it?
Well, in next week's Columbia preview series, Miss Young will take the starring role in the drama of an American Red Cross nurse. That's good news, isn't it?
Oh, that's great. But now listen, Hitch. You've just got to tell that audience exactly when and how Mr. Sleuth was caught.
Caught? Why on earth should he be caught?
Why? Well, he was the Avenger, wasn't he?
Was he?
Your guess, gentle listener, is as good as ours. Even Mrs. Bella Glowns, who wrote the novel, isn't entirely sure. For his masterful direction, our thanks to Alfred Hitchcock, whose latest pictures are David O. Selznick's Rebecca and Walter Wanger's Foreign Correspondent. For his superb characterization of Mr. Sleuth, our thanks to Herbert Marshall. And our thanks to the outstanding British character actor who tonight portrayed the role of Bunting, Edmund Gwenn. If you liked tonight's program and want to hear more in the same highly original Hitchcock vein, radio versions of The Lady Vanishes and The 39 Steps, for example, write to CBS and tell us so. Your interest will help bring Suspense to the air as a weekly feature. Forecast next week presents from Hollywood, Loretta Young in Angel, first of a proposed series based on the adventures and the romance of a typical Red Cross nurse. From New York, a new sort of comedy show, Ed Gardner as Archie in Duffy's Tavern, with Gertrude Neeson, Colonel Stoopnagle, Larry Adler, and John Kirby's orchestra. Don't miss Forecast at this hour next week. Thomas Freeband speaking. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
But the broadcast flopped. Variety said, "Alfie, old boy, don't ever do that to us again," referring to the open ending. That, along with Hitchcock's spotty availability, spooked advertisers. No one wanted to sponsor the program. Suspense was mothballed. Of all the pilots that aired during Season 1 of Forecast, only Duffy's Tavern got picked up, and even that didn't happen until March of 1941.
Well, we had some opposition from the New York boys who felt that this is a little unorthodox. The more we talked about it, the more excited I got about it. And I want to say I was wrong. I don't think that's the way we should have ended the play. Because after it was done, the CBS sales staff couldn't sell it because the Madison Avenue boys said, how can you do a mystery series without clearing up the mystery at the end of each program? Because I had forgotten to put anything into it, that this was just an exceptional play, and maybe in subsequent programming you would know who the villain was and how he got his comeuppance and so on.
Charles Vanda was soon called back to New York to produce shows like the Columbia Workshop. There he worked with Bill Spear. Within 2 years, the duo would finally bring Suspense to the air.